ballots. And so we had one council member who served a long time, but started with his name being drawn out of the hat. So that's always interesting, and that's something I think everyone agrees probably not the best process. We asked the Charter Review Commission to look at this as well, and they looked at it. And initially, they tried to codify what's been the more recent practice, which is to have a selection committee made up of members who live in the ward in which there is a vacancy, who would then select someone and send that forward to council for consideration. They initially added that language into their recommendation, but by the end of the process, they reconsidered that and just left the amendment to that section to be pretty simple, to clarify that when you appoint someone, that's through the end of the term. We talked about this in this committee in April of 2021, so just a little over a year ago. We talked about what that process would and should look like. How many members should be on the selection committee? What should the application look like? And in reading this, I recognized it was for the Ward 2 vacancy, which was the second vacancy in a matter of months for that ward. So certainly wanted to get that filled more quickly than setting another election, which we had also tried, I think, for that ward. So,
and if you recall, we thought that we would be able to use the special election route, but the June election date available to us was only an issue-related election, not an election to fill an office.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So every year there are amendments to the provisions for elections, and it's a little hard to codify something in the charter that accommodates the ever-changing statute.
Yeah.
And the timelines, because you have to give 60 days notice for regular elections, 75 days for special, that really leaves the ward without representation for a long time. And so we want to avoid that as well. So the things the Oversight Committee talked about included, as I said, how many people would be appointed to the committee. Everyone wanted them to be residents of the ward that was being vacated. There was some discussion, I think, about whether or not the vacating member should have some say in the appointment of the selection committee. I don't think that ended up being a strong recommendation one way or the other from council. Whether or not we should require the applicants to disclose their voting history or provide their voting history came up. We want on the application, I think, some questions about that, whether or not they've been involved in city boards, commissions, or other activities, and some questions that would help us identify potential conflicts with the council position. There was discussion about limiting the number of interviews so that they're all done on the same day and the deliberations happen on the same day. There's been a lot of discussion about people who interviewed day 2 having the questions from day 1. But where I really think they get them from, because they're all public meetings, when the committee discusses what interview questions they want to use, a really savvy candidate could go and listen to that meeting and know what questions were going to come up. And I don't think there's a way we can prevent that because of the Open Meeting Act. But, they can at least work for it, I guess. I think the desire about the questions was to have really a standard set, but then allow the committee to add ward-specific questions.
Yeah.
Try to stay away from really controversial political hot-button issues, one-issue questions, more help get an idea of policy, more broad policy. And then have the selection committee send one name forward to the council. There was some discussion about, does it have to be unanimous? I think we ended up with consensus of the committee is okay with 5 members. That would be at least 3 agreeing on who to send forward. So if we are to adopt this process somehow, my recommendation would be to put it in a resolution, simply because the only place in our codified charter and ordinances where this is addressed is in the charter, and we're not taking that forward to the voters for this kind of process. So a resolution would be an easy way to sort of set that process out and have that ready should we have another vacancy.
Okay. So as far as this answers my question. I haven't had a chance to look at your memo. So the one thing that we are sending to the voters in August is the clarification that has been confusing every single time of, do you fill out the term or there's been massive confusion about that. So that actually is a charter review recommendation that is going to be in the ballot language, right? So we
Yes.
are addressing that.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that question comes up every time. We've treated it the same every time, but the question continues to be raised, so it's a good opportunity to fix that.
So that particular issue, the voters will have an opportunity to express their preference when they have a chance to vote on August 23rd? Yeah, August 23rd, okay. So that takes care of that. Well, all right, I'm really interested in hearing from both of the council members that are present here. When this was discussed in April of 2021, we literally had, I think, the appointment process for Councilmember Schuler for Ward 2, I think that was the 5th time that we had gone through the process since July of 2019. And I think some of the concerns that were raised at the time, from my point of view, because I also went through that appointment process, we appointed Ward 6, Ward 4, Ward 5, Ward 2, and then Ward 2 again. Yeah. So actually, it was might not be quite in that order, but we went through that process multiple times, and we had kind of the broad brushstroke, but it wasn't consistent every time, and I think that got the attention of council members, and it also got the attention of those that were participating in the appointment process and the wards that were affected, and so that's why. This came up in 21 because it was like, okay, how can we sort of streamline what we've learned from all of these individual processes in such a short period of time, literally to avoid never putting ourselves in a position to draw a name from a hat. And so the things that stood out to me that I think in the end have served us well through those 5 appointment processes were the fact that we were depending on a selection committee that was ward specific, and the reference about the council member being involved, it was really in the context of working with the mayor to identify a diverse group of people that could represent the ward, since the council member would know best. But then it was up to council to approve that selection committee. But I thought that that particular piece of it served us well. It seemed to be important to have ward representatives be able to be in touch with their ward instead of the council being put in the position. And I think, forwarding a name also served us well for the most part. So those were a couple of things that I think really stood out as strengths. And then the number of applicants per ward vacancy varied greatly. So there might have been 5 for one and 15 for another one. And, there was some question at the time, should that be consistent? Or do you let each selection committee just kind of come up with their own idea? So like one appointment process, they interviewed every single candidate, and it took almost 2 weeks to do it, to get everybody's schedule, on board. And then I think by the time we had your selection process, the decision was made to, based on the application, select the top 3 to 5 candidates to be interviewed. So, there's some things that varied there. So I myself am interested in the resolution route to try to have it a little bit more consistent, but definitely I'm interested in what you all think.
Sure. I don't have the experience of going through this process as a sitting council member, so my only perspective is going through it on the side of an applicant through the process and as a citizen. And so I do believe that by the time it got to the selection that I was a part of, it had
Number 5.
it was fleshed out, I think, to a better understanding of what the process was going to kind of look like and what it was going to be. So I'll have other people speak to what it felt like on the other side for council. But I do think that it is really important as someone who's trying to come into a position that is not elected by your council and by by your ward and by the citizens that you will represent, that we try to make it as representative as possible of the ward who you'll be representing. So having the members of the selection committee make up the ward from the ward, I think is critical and really important. It also helps solidify the legitimacy of the person who will be stepping into the role. But I also thought that it was important in terms of questions that were asked, that because Ward 2 had seen so much turnover in a year's time. One of the questions, and I believe that it was asked to Councilmember Hall when she was going through the process, was, are you going to run? And I think that was an important question that should be consistent. I think that it's important for the ward to know where people stand with that, but then also council to see where that is. I don't necessarily, and the committee can decide if that's a determining factor for elevating, whoever gets to the top position. But I do think that it should be asked in some capacity.
So that actually might be something that is included in the application.
Right.
It's just a standard question, and then it would be up to the selection committee to determine, okay, we know what path you're choosing. Does that make a difference? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I just think that having a standard procedure for all parties involved, not only council, who is ultimately voting on the appointment, but whoever's the outgoing person, the ward, the citizens who will be represented, and then also the people, the applicants who are going through the process, to understand at every kind of step of the way what is expected and what is going to be the outcome of that process. And so I think, from my perspective and my side of things, that that selection process worked well during my selection. And I would have said the same thing had I not been the person selected through that process. I felt like it was straightforward. I understood what the process was going to look like, what it was going to be like. Those are kind of my initial thoughts on this, but I do think that it is important for us to codify this in some way so that there's consistency for our community.
Okay. Councilman Woolman?
I agree with all those comments. Having been through it multiple times on this side, I like the idea of a committee, or being in writing, what the process should be. The future councils can reference. They can always change it, of course, but that there's something on paper that outlines what the expectation is, so that everybody can know what they're getting into. And I like the idea of a citizen resident voter, or ward resident / voter, registered voter committee. And I like the idea of them making a recommendation, because my experience with the council making the decision is the problem has been that with only 8 members, it's kind of been the feeling that nobody wants to approve or disapprove of any of them. So it's been a 4-4 split a couple times, and it ends up in the name drawing out of a hat, and that just makes people feel weird about it. And so
the deliberation happen at the committee level
Yeah.
until a name has.
yeah, because it's like you don't know, you're gonna have to work with either one of them. You you may think they're both really good, and you don't want to like,
The drawing out of the hat seems the least democratic possible way that we could
yeah,
do that.
yeah,
So if we can avoid that at all cost.
Yeah.
yeah, yes. It would be, I don't know, it might not be practical in many instances, but it'd be nice to have like a goal of that ward committee being made up of people from each of the precincts. So
Yes.
maybe you could say there's 5 members, but you would try to make those 5 members be from each of the precincts in the ward. Some of the precincts overlap, and it may not be possible, but it'd be nice if not all 5 live in the same neighborhood.
Right.
I would say.
And I can't speak to, all of them, but I really did go back and look in depth at, what path did we go for Ward 6? How did it work for Ward 4? How did it work to Ward 5? And that's the piece about if the former council member is available, being able to help the mayor, do just exactly that. So for the Ward 4 appointment process, literally, no precincts overlapped. I mean, an effort was made
Good,
to
yeah.
touch every precinct and to touch kind of the top interests. So just for example, in Ward 4, the only ward that has all 3 historic districts, a deliberate choice was made to have someone that was in a leadership position in one of the historic district neighborhood associations that could address that unique aspect.
Yeah.
So I don't know how specific you want to be, but I agree with you. I think if there's a way to get the broadest and most diverse representation possible to represent the demographics of your ward, that would be what you were looking for.
So, and yeah, I mean, be flexible. Sometimes you may have to.
Yeah.
The people you're able to get are the people you're able to get.
Sure, yeah.
It could be hard in Ward 7 to find a person from each precinct, I could imagine. So, that being just
the
kind
general
of
goal,
the
yeah.
idea that we'd want to go for. But
Yeah.
other than that, I definitely, like I said, I like having a process that's written down that can be referenced when this comes up, and having a citizens of the ward committee that maybe I like the idea of them deciding if they want to interview 5 or they want to interview all of them that apply, or however that committee feels like they want to do it. I'd be fine with leaving it up to them
Okay.
as far as interviewing candidates or going through the applications, but that they would make a recommendation. And I do think questions like, have you been an active voter in ward, wouldn't be disqualifying if you just moved there a few months ago and you're getting active and stuff, and this came up and you wanted to apply. I wouldn't want to discourage people from doing that, but I do think it's important that people, if you want to be appointed to the city council without having had to earn the trust of the voters, that maybe needs to be a little bit higher bar where we ask about, or have you been a active voter in that ward? Have you participated in any kind of city functions, boards, commissions? That type of background, I think, would be helpful. Not disqualifying, but helpful to know.
So I think, just again, based on the experience from 2019 forward, I know that Ms. Walker and our city clerk have been part of this process for years, and that correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is a standard set of questions that you've worked from, that you've learned from experience, have been really effective.
Yes.
And then, we already have, feel like we already have that. And then I think it's also been really useful to allow the selection committee to come up with ward-specific questions, because every ward has its own, personality or things that might be of interest to that particular ward that wouldn't necessarily reveal itself in just a standard set of questions. So I think that, it's important to include that part. So the other thing that I think just bears a review is just the application itself, because I think we have added some things from 2019 forward. And so maybe at the staff level, reviewing that application and deciding, okay, what could we really cover in the application that wouldn't waste time in an interview setting, you know? And if they wanted to follow up on the question of, let's just use, for example, are you going to run or not going to run? You know, what would, you know, what's your decision-making process about something like that? If it's already on the application, everybody's been asked that, and, you know, it may not even be a question that the selection committee wants to talk about. They just know.
Yeah.
And when they deliberate, they have that information available.
Just a check.
And then the voting record thing also could just be very standard, just like I think on the application, we probably could have taken a look at that, but on the application, if I recall, I mean, it does have an opportunity for you to list your civic engagement. Maybe you haven't been on a city board or committee, but you've been very active on a nonprofit board or some other capacity that shows your level of interest. And that's a question. So the voter engagement piece could certainly be part of the application process too. That you know, we just want to know about that. And I think by the time we got to the Ward 2 selection committee in April, that was just provided by staff. They'd gone ahead and done the voter records that they provided to the selection committee, and I think that was really well received by the committee members to just have that information available. So just maybe looking at the application and seeing places where you could just add those things that would just be standard for anybody that was applying. And then the only other thing I can really think of that I'm interested in your feedback too is just this whole notion of how do you reach consensus? What is that? Because that really became a hot button issue several times in the different selection processes. And, you know, some selection committees, and that could just be help and guidance too, but some selection committees just sort of figured that out on their own, that they didn't have a unanimous candidate, but by the time they walked out of the room, it wasn't like just a vote, 3-2. It was, okay, let's see if we can all agree. This might not have been my first choice, but of where we are, yes, I'm on board with recommending that, instead of having like the minority report of, no, that was just so divisive.
Generally, there's two candidates that rise to the top pretty quick. You know, what they've done is gone through and said the name of like their top 2 or 3, and you'll see a lot of overlap between the top 2, and then they continue discussion about those, and then eventually it's like you said, they've reached a consensus and no one's upset about the outcome because generally speaking, whoever's selected is everyone recognized as being qualified. It just may not have been their number one choice.
Right. So, you know, I don't know how we address that exactly, but that might be in instructions to the committee, or it might be something that, however, you know, you want to move forward on resolution language, but I think you get the idea. So did you have other comments?
Yeah, well, I wanted to speak to the voter record
Yes, please
piece,
do.
because I remember during my process that, I mean, it wasn't specifically asked on our application, it wasn't asked in the meeting, but it was noted after the fact about my voting record. And so I was wondering, I was like, that's public data. And so that is available and in some capacity could be provided. And what you said, that it was provided to the committee. So I do think that those things are important to see, because we know that there is a lack of participation at the municipal level, specifically with voting. And so I think that it is of interest to anybody who would be, you know, wanting to appoint, or to council who's appointing someone to, you know, this position, that they are focused and have been focused on city issues, and paying attention to city issues for a while.
It does seem like if that information is available to the committee, if they were down to 2 and like, okay, how do we break the tie among ourselves? Well, this individual's participated in every election for the last 8 years. and this person's voted once. And maybe that is the type of data that lets them say, okay, now we can get consensus with all of the background story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not data that tells you how, it's just telling you that they voted. So I do think that that's really kind of important. And then I was just pulling up my application, just to look at what the application actually looks like. And it's a single sheet of paper.
Yeah.
So I do believe that we could beef that up a little bit and be a little bit more strategic and targeted with the information that we're gathering on there, because it's fairly straightforward. And I would add, I know that this is not the item that we're talking about, but I would also add that it's pretty similar to what we are asking our residents to fill out for boards and commissions.
Yeah.
And I think that that could also use a little look over. Because it's literally just asking, relevant information about like name, address, phone number, things like that, which are pretty standard. And then there are like 3 questions.
Yeah.
Basically the stuff about civic engagement, like an open answer. And then a please explain why you're interested in serving as a council member for Ward 2. Feel free to attach additional information if needed. So it's a very open-ended, do whatever you feel is necessary, I guess, to do that, which I think is important to provide as much opportunity for candidates to provide information. But I do think that there could be some additional questions on the front end to help screen for the committees.
Yeah.
And the level of
Same.
information provided.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that additional response has been something that the committees discussed.
Yeah.
Right.
If they don't provide anything,
Yeah.
and you have someone, you provided a resume
Yeah.
and maybe a cover letter and,
Yeah.
so,
And
that
it does
tells you
speak
something.
volumes too of just how an applicant, how intentional they are about presenting themselves to the selection committee, because, just have seen that in multiple forms last time around, or the last few years, that does tell you a lot. But I definitely think that, in all fairness to the applicant, if we included the question about the voting history, or just say, would you like to comment on your voting history? We will be pulling blah, 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 to let them know that that's going to be a
Yeah.
piece. And I think adding, you're appointed for a short period of time,
Yeah. Are
what's
you
your
planning?
intention about, and some people have very legitimate reasons why they're not going to run, and that's important for the committee to know, and depending on the circumstances, that may or may not, it might be fine.
Yeah.
So-
One other point just about the application.
Yeah,
I
sure.
do hesitate to put too many restrictions and parameters around
Yeah.
what exactly you're looking for, because I do think
Right.
it provides an opportunity
Yeah.
to showcase how serious you are and what level of commitment you are willing to put into it. And so, as you said, that is discussed at that level. And so, like, if you put minimal effort into it, I think that shows the committee, potentially what kind of effort you might put in on council.
Yeah.
And so it provides an opportunity to get more information without asking for more information. So I don't want, to say, we require all of these things,
No,
check
yeah.
all of these boxes, but I do think that it's important to maybe ask a few screening type things.
Do you have any suggestions? Or?
Those ones that you listed, I
Okay.
think are
Yeah.
smart,
Well,
at
and
least.
really standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have any other suggestions for what might want to be included? Okay. Okay.
Covers it.
Any other comments?
Just really
Yeah.
happy to see this
Yeah.
move forward.
So do you have any other questions or anything that we need to clarify, or do you have enough information to go forward to come back with some resolution language?
I think I have enough information. My question really was going to be, do you want me to come back to this committee, or do you want me to bring a draft to the full council?
Say full council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
Yep.
good?
Yeah.
So,
Well, we have consensus for taking it to the full council.
Okay.
Those present.
We can do that.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you responding to that agenda item in such a timely manner. So the second item on our agenda is discussion regarding the creation of a written policy for postponement of zoning applications. And I literally requested that we revisit this because this what was brought before us at our last Oversight Committee, and we, had a robust discussion about just the process from beginning to end. But I know that this one is of importance to us and timely, and it is something that we can separate out and move forward on. So I'm just going to let you take it away, Ms.
Okay.
Muckala.
Well, as Councilmember Hall mentioned, this is a portion of a previous conversation, and so you've seen this general framework before, but I have, kind of going off our conversation then, added a bit. First, that you'll see, I've added a different section to add a little blurb to, and that's our PUD ordinance. I think it's actually likely that PUD applications are more likely to come across this issue. So it made sense to create a cross-reference to just make it crystal clear that that's applying here.
Yeah.
And actually, as I was sitting here, you're all aware of the Muni code changes that are coming and the renumbering. So that reference may look a little different when you finally see
Okay.
it, but it's going to be the same general thing. Turning that page over is what you've kind of seen before, but again, I tweaked it. I think it was a comment from Councilmember Holman of, well, hey, what if there's a no vote? And the idea of just closed door language that seems to leave no room. I mean, it's not unique, but I thought, what could we do to make it clear that there's some sort of standard? And so I did add some language about absent unique or extenuating circumstances. And these would be probably items of discussion when you're considering the postponement that would come to light. Then they will get their applicant requested postponement that one time. Otherwise, it's completely at your discretion. I added that language too to make it crystal clear that after that, that's what you get. So it's kind of presumptive that they're going to get it, not impossible to say no. But of course, it's about the application. So I can't, as I sit here, think of extenuating circumstances, but that doesn't mean we aren't creative enough to see them in the future.
Councilmember Holman.
So before a project gets to first reading on council, could the developer, like say I'm not ready to go to, I've been going through the process, but I'm not ready to go to council yet. Can they hold basically until they're ready? Because I mean, I'd prefer people not come forward to council unless they are for sure ready and don't have to ask for postponements because they've already worked it out. Or once they start, the clock's ticking and they have to come forward.
Generally, yes, the applicant has always been in charge of their application that way. Now, there is kind of a standard timeline that we follow where they usually go to first reading during the first meeting of the month following their planning commission. And that's really to allow administrative time for the information to get there.
The flow. Yeah.
But they don't have to be placed on that agenda. And I think we have had people ask to slow it down before. Generally, that's not the way that they think about
Sure.
it, but it's always been an option. And I don't think that we would discourage it. And this may encourage them to think more about that.
Yeah, that'd be ideal,
like-
so they don't have to
yeah.
ask for multiple postponements.
Because the ultimate goal that I'm hoping that we can achieve is, again, that if we need to address concerns, and I think there are some, that the investment at the earlier stages of the process, as we refine and move forward the application, I would much rather see the investment in time or the pausing, to go back and tweak their application based on pre-development comments possibly, or, we've definitely seen feedback from the Planning Commission that also an applicant has been willing to go, oh, okay, we didn't really think about it like that. So I think those kind of pauses before it finally comes to council, I'm much more comfortable with those pauses to improve the application. But by the time it is on first reading, this should be a completely well-developed application that's ready to be considered. And whatever tweaks that we can make earlier in the process that we spoke about last time, I'm interested in investing that time there. But I think this is something that we actually can go ahead and, if we're comfortable with this language, go ahead and move forward. So any other feedback or comments or, because I'm certainly comfortable with what we're trying to accomplish here and am willing to move forward if you all are comfortable with that.
I am.
Yeah, I think that it's important that we're also kind of trying to put this process in writing as well. And I think that it's been one of frustration for not only council, but also for residents who are going through the process and not understanding why, they keep getting strung along or things get pulled at the last minute or postponed. And so this is just another one of those things that we're trying to really make sure that the process is clear, transparent, understandable from kind of the
everybody.
beginning to everybody.
And what the expectation of the applicant is by the time you're ready to come to council, all of these other interactions have been, feedback and all the stakeholders and everybody that's affected by a zoning change like this, that it's as well developed as it possibly can be. So there really shouldn't be any need for any more postponements beyond one that obviously there are multiple reasons why you have to ask for that one. And I'm fine with that, but after that, so. I appreciate the work that you put into it. So next step is what? Does it need to come back here?
Right, and so it could be presented next to full council, but I was thinking about the schedule in light of Muni code and renumbering.
And we're supposed to get the Muni Code final draft by the end of the month.
Really?
Yes. We'll go through it one more time, before we bring it forward, so that will affect the renumbering. So we could do it in, sooner. It would just not get put into the ordinance book, the renumbering. It's just more they have to correct.
Okay.
Recodify.
Okay, and what is that involved
So
if you have to renumber?
I think they've been holding ordinances that you all have adopted in recent months to add in at the very end in the final draft, so this would be added to that. It's just we're so close to the end of the final draft, we're kind of holding on the ones we can control.
Okay,
I think we'll be adopting it probably July, maybe August, at the latest, I would think.
Okay.
If this absolutely had to be adopted before, then we could certainly do that. It will have to go to planning commission because it's a zoning ordinance amendment, so there's a lag anyway
okay.
for that, so.
Well, I'd certainly be comfortable with this moving it along the process, and then at whatever point we need to hold, okay, but to continue to show our intention of this is what we want to have happen.
Because we don't need to know the number that it'll eventually be titled with at planning commission, do we?
No, I think we could take it as is and
Okay.
then make that tweak if, between planning commission and council, depending on the timing, if it works out.
And the new codification there, it's numbered in such a way to give us room to add new pieces in
Yes.
by point 0001.
Lots of digits,
Yep.
yeah. It's gonna be a lot to get used to.
Well,
Expandable for the next 20 years.
nice. So the end result is going to be definitely an improvement for everyone involved. Well, my preference is to go ahead and continue to move it through the process until we hit
Council
a
adoption. first
roadblock
reading.
that you say, okay, we're 3 weeks out, but let's keep moving it along. Are you all good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate the work on that. Okay, number 3, staff report on homeless activity, and Ms. Craig has to leave at 5, so we're gonna make
Well,
it.
I can cancel my hair appointment.
Oh,
I
no.
need to for the
Listen.
third time, but I'll need a new hairdresser.
Priorities in life are important.
I won't volunteer
Work-life
'cause
balance,
you wouldn't
work-life
like the
balance,
outcome,
yeah.
so.
So I think I got in the packet, the report. I think I got it
Yes, you
over in
did.
time.
And thank you so much for getting that to us.
One thing to point out, since this ran through the end of April, where we were rocking along every night at capacity, starting with the weekend of the music festival, we have drastically dropped.
Huh.
And we are at about 20 a night now. So,
Do you have any theory?
have no clue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Drier weather, warmer weather.
Well, what we are seeing is that we're addressing is a couple of things that, the air conditioner just really doesn't thrive over there. Half the building's a warehouse. And they have 2 units, one of which is on the fritz that they're having trouble getting parts for. And so this is just in the last few days of going back and forth. They're trying to find parts, finding an alternative of, what'll it cost to replace the system, things like that. We went and got more fans, which got the air moving a little bit. But even last summer, it's not what you'd call pleasant.
Well,
Just
that
the-
might be why people
That
aren't
might
coming
be part
back.
of it.
Yeah.
But
Safe
what
and
we
secure,
were
just not
seeing
very cool.
Yeah.
was more activity just hanging in the alley, which I've put the kibosh on that.
Okay.
We put signs up, no trespassing, discarded materials will be removed, or unattended materials. I cheaped out and went up to Signs 360 and had some made and got some really heavy-duty adhesive. And working with the business owners, we put them up, they lasted a day. So Streets made some that are now screwed to the buildings.
Okay.
And we've made an effort to clean the alley up. There's still some work to be done on the surrounding property. But the property we lease and then the 2 immediately to the west with the cooperation of the owners are all signed and cleaned up.
Okay.
Bruce asked for some signs, so I dropped them off yesterday and he was putting those up today.
Right.
And so we are basically telling people that you can either come in or leave, but you can't stay here.
And since we haven't been at capacity, I've been operating under an assumption that if we were at capacity every night, that people were arriving earlier to make sure that they would be able to have a spot. But if we're not at capacity right now, that's not an issue.
You could use that theory. I don't buy it.
Okay.
Because,
Better than I do.
people are out there all day long. And
I've noticed that more and more
The
and
existing
more.
of pallets and things that make good places to sit on and hang out, as we're getting that type of material removed, there's less comfortable places just to hang out in the alley other than just
yeah,
sitting on
yesterday
the
I
ground
went
leaning
by,
against the
we
building.
delivered fans yesterday afternoon. There was nobody there, but there were 4 backpacks and sacks of belongings sitting just in the middle. I didn't throw them away, but the shelter staff is instructing everybody every night that beginning next week, everything gets thrown away, and it's not getting thrown away in the dumpster there. It's being taken someplace else and thrown away. I will tell you that both Monday night and Tuesday night, I addressed the crowd as they were out there, and I took a lot of lip and was challenged on boundaries. And basically, I just pointed out that this is a collective effort. You guys are a part of it. We need to pull together because it's jeopardizing the continuance of this. And I had my trash can. I said, I'm getting ready to pick up some trash if anybody wants to help. One guy started helping me. The peanut gallery over at the next building started calling him Mama's boy.
Oh, my.
I told him, that's fine. I understand. Don't worry about it. Thanks for helping. He didn't go back over there. He got in line and came in. So I took that as a win. Then
Absolutely.
the next client had a bottle of vodka, plastic, and drained it and looked at me and dropped the bottle and kicked it out. And I said, I'm going to ask you once to pick it up. And he said, well, what if I don't? I said, you'll never be here again. And I'm making a call. I'm just joshing with you. And he went and picked it up and threw it away. He hadn't been back, but he did go in that night. We're seeing increased drug and alcohol use on the site. repeat ambulance. We had to call last night, someone went into a seizure because of methamphetamines. We're trying, we're really trying. We did hire 5 new staff people to help with engaging of the clientele, trying to work with the housing authority on possibilities for how to approach housing with this population. You know, we all know how hard it is even just to go get an apartment these days. It's working, it could be a lot better.
Lisa, quick question. I know we don't have the final report on the point in time, but from what you're seeing, does our number continue to decline?
We do have a final report.
Oh,
Yes.
all right.
We had 197, 120 sheltered, which is fairly consistent to what our capacity is, 77 unsheltered. That is what was reported by the agencies. We did not send people out looking under trees. I don't think it's worth the effort myself. This is people that are engaging with agencies that came in on that 24 hours, as well as the multiple outreach efforts of PD, SSVF, and COCMHC that went out on that day.
Was this done in January or a different time?
January,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, we did not file a waiver asking to postpone it. We
Yeah.
didn't see the need.
Yeah. That was my understanding, but I just wanted to check.
We have now pretty much reconstructed the by name list. We need to make one more pass through it next week. Still fairly consistent to what we had, 200 people or so. And we're really working on setting what the standards for going on the by name list and coming off the by name list are. People are still getting housed. It's slow. But, you know.
So do we have any more of a concrete timeline on the opening of Gibbs House? Is that imminent?
Have not
or-
heard back. I do have an
Okay.
email pending with Mr. Duran Crosby, and the only other thing we're working on and waiting for is the appraisal on the former specialty hospital on Robinson at Berry. So
Okay.
lots of activity.
Yes.
We're waiting for other people to bring us information, and we'll be making some recommendations to council as soon as those documents arrive.
So even though we don't have the alternate or the next temporary location, we lost months of effort of trying to secure the next location with circumstances beyond our control, I think is fair to say. The development or the evolution of getting Gibbs House opened is independent of all of the other land activity that's happening on that property, right?
Correct.
So we are still expecting to have that as a day resource opportunity that may help with some of the folks that we're seeing that, you know, need a safe place to stay at night. We're hopefully within weeks or a month or so of having another opportunity for people to get a place that they can be in the daytime, and also another opportunity for case management services, that type of thing. So I'm going to just stay optimistic and hope that that's going to be an added service and an added place to help. So as
And
far
even
as you
in-
know, we're on.
Yes,
Okay.
on that trajectory, and even in,
Okay.
you know, closer proximity to food and shelter where breakfast and lunch are served. So
Okay, so that's
that's
still,
where the concentration of the energy and the activity still exist.
and still moving forward on our property acquisition on.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. Anything else that you wanted to add, or are there any questions? Councilmember Holman?
So it looks to me, based off of this, that there's an increase in people over 45, but specifically
Yeah.
in the 55 to 61 and the 62 plus.
Yeah.
There were 26 from September to April, and 9 of them were in April.
Yeah.
And there were 60, that was 62 plus, and then 55 to 61, there were 60 September through April, and 20 of them were in April. So increase in elderly folks.
We have
So-
had discussions with aging services that they are willing to utilize their case managers once we can figure out a process for housing for them, because they have certified case managers also for the elderly population, that they said that if, they could take some of them and provide case management for them. They do provide all of the sanitary products for the shelter, which has helped immensely, because I went into Walmart and looked at adult diapers and didn't know what to do, except see my future. But yeah, I just put the call out and they bring over cases of it. And it's amazing how many we go through.
Well, I think it's something people should be aware of,
Yeah.
the demographics of the people that are staying here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also noticed that there seems to be an increase in veterans staying
Yes.
there as well.
I've noticed that too.
46 through, from September to April, 11 in April.
Yeah, that ebbs and flows. Right now, we have, I think, 5 on the by name list, veterans. We have re-engaged with Community Solutions in the Built for Zero program. We had a meeting with them earlier this week to get caught up on what we need to do to get reinstated. And, they said that multiple communities went through this with COVID and welcomed us back into the fold. And so,
And then from a high in 2019 of 347, we're down to 197.
there, I want to put an asterisk on this. The point in time count is just a snapshot.
Sure.
And those 2 years, against multiple objections I had, even though HUD sided with it, we counted our unsheltered count as anybody we came across during that time, as well as who was on our by name list. I see it both ways. HUD allowed us to do it those years. They did not allow after that. And so these two are kind of anomalies, in that I think it provides a much more accurate picture because the by name list is much more accurate. My concern is that the numbers really don't appear to be consistent as you start comparing year to year to year to year.
Because you're not using the same.
Yeah.
So in those
reference
prior
points.
years, those could just be anybody that happened to be
They
in
were-
Norman that night.
Well, they were on the by name list, which we have verified that they are street homeless. And, but we may not have actually seen them during that time. That's kind of the easy way. If they would say you could do that every year, that would be great, because we know these people are homeless versus who we just happen to come across in that 24 hours, which is hit or miss.
Well, and just, we can't, I don't think you can, I think it's important to have that asterisk because you're using a different methodology
Yeah.
every year, and we can't, again, underestimate the impact that COVID had and how we had to adjust to that, and we did have a waiver last year, correct?
Right, so
Yeah.
last year we did not do an unsheltered count.
Yeah,
And
so.
we had a reduced number because so many of the programs had a reduced capacity.
Yeah, so.
Because of that, yeah.
You have to put that all in context too. And again, this year, we didn't request a waiver. We went ahead and did the point in time count, but it was not that massive. I mean, the last time we did that massive community effort, I was on one of those teams, and there were, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There were people everywhere, all over this town for that 24-hour
Right,
period.
and we still covered the known locations.
Sure,
All of the encampments SSVF and COCMHC went to.
Yeah.
And so we captured the same data. And to me, it's always kind of awkward when you have the community volunteers and you're sending them out and they're going up to, the guy with the backpack saying, "Are you homeless? Yeah. We're doing a survey." And, it's apples and oranges, and there's really no prescribed correct way that everybody does it.
right. So that makes a difference in what your count looks like. And, I guess I would just sort of underscore that was another of the recommendations in our home-based report, that we really do need to be intentional about the data that we're collecting,
Yeah.
that our partners all need to be collecting the same type
Right.
of information. So, these are all things that hopefully in the years to come, and we address that particular gap, that will only get better at how we're collecting data. Councilmember Schuler.
Just as we were talking about this, just want to clarify, is the point in time cover just the city of Norman, or is that for the whole
That's Cleveland
Cleveland
County,
County? Just,
right.
just like our continuum of care
Right,
as
right,
well? Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
I just like to also point
Yes.
that out, that it's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah,
City
and
of
we do
Norman.
reach out to the city of Moore and Cleveland County. And of course, the SSVF and COCMHC, they cover the whole county anyway, so.
So we are gathering information there too.
I just think it's important to put that caveat on these numbers as
Another
well.
asterisk.
Another asterisk when we're talking about this and if citizens are seeing this.
Yeah,
and
we,
residents, that
yeah,
it's
we
not just in
literally
Norman.
just submitted this last week, and I thought, I'm gonna do this while I'm thinking about it. And so we're gonna dig deeper into this, and we plan on having some sort of a report out.
Okay.
We talked about that in a meeting earlier today, to where we can really talk about some of these numbers and where they come from, and the discrepancies between them, and how we are gonna approach
Excellent.
tidying up the data.
Councilmember Holman?
Last question for me is, so in all of Cleveland County, there are homeless people in towns that don't provide services?
Yes and no. There's, again, this meets the HUD definition. The city of Moore, they will have various people that they come across, and I wouldn't really call them encampments, sleeping under a bridge or something like that. First Baptist Church in Moore has lots of outreach programs. And so people go there for assistance, and they refer them to us. So we capture data that way. That's kind of their big clearinghouse there. Sky and the staff at the city of Moore are really good about communicating and getting the information from their PD. When the county comes across someone, what you will see in the outlying areas is you'll see more couch surfing going on, which doesn't meet the HUD criteria.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
we had a guy at the shelter earlier this week to walk from Wanette.
Oh, my.
Did he say what?
It's been hot outside, holy smokes.
Just on the move. And this was his first stop, and he goes, I'm gonna stay here and get rested and keep walking.
Wow.
So we asked him if there was some place he really wanted to go, and could we help him get there, and he said, no. Just decided to leave Wanette, so.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Time for you to go on to your next commitment. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then thank you for everyone's assistance
All righty.
and input
Thank
today,
y'all.
and this meeting is adjourned.